Welcome to this, my 16th video in the series Rishi Devra, the Fantasy and the Facts. In this video we're going to take a closer look at the whistleblower's legal battle with Devra Patton West and how after he obtained a judgment against her for defrauding him, how she eventually managed to turn the tables on him using lies, deceit, misinformation, and the fact that she could outspend him in terms of legal fees. Before going any further, let us review what Miss West said to the whistleblower at the meeting in March of 2003 when he announced that he was going to take her to court for fraud. And I would warn you that there's foul language ahead from the guru.
I'm not going to take this laying down. If you want to sue, go so fucking down and dirty. Huge expenses, John, and it isn't going to come out of my pocket.
As I intend to show in this YouTube video and the following YouTube video, Miss West lived up to her promise to get so freaking down and dirty. Huge expenses coming out of John's pocket but not hers. And this was how Miss West eventually turned the table on John Watson by outspending him. We have dealt with in previous YouTube videos some of the dirty tricks West employed, like false witnesses, clumsy attempts at intimidation by senior cult members, character assassination by senior members of her cult from her website, and eventually Miss West would use her occult skills against Mr. Watson, as she did several other witnesses of the assault upon Dr. Cole. Indeed, in 2007, April, John Watson had a long discussion with Constable Jeannie Landis at the Flathead police station about the fact that she'd received several complaints from employees, students of Miss West, who had complained about them being on the receiving end of psychic attacks from Miss West. Jeannie Landis explained to them that there was nothing she could do because the weapon Miss West was using against them, the occult, is not regarded as a weapon in legal statute. She went on to say, however, that if several witnesses came forward, there could be a case in which they could prove intent to cause harm on behalf of Miss West. That is what these YouTube videos are all about, collecting together several of the scores of victims of Miss West over the past 3 decades so that we can assist the FBI. So let's get into that legal battle. On the screen at the moment we see part of the court's order in granting summary judgment to John Watson. The court states that Miss West basically ignored the court proceedings, failed to apologize, failed to act, failed to comply with scheduling, deadlines, etc., and on the basis of that failure, the court determined that Miss West should be sanctioned. On this slide, we see that the court made the determination to grant John Watson's summary judgment and set a date in the future where the court would decide what penalties would be administered against Miss West. Because of the number of slides, I'm going to whiz through them quickly. Pause if you want to view them individually. Of course, this should have been the end of the matter, but for 2 reasons it was not the end of the matter. The first is that Miss West is used to having her own way, and to have somebody stand up to her very publicly like John Watson did meant that she needed to avenge that slight, which is what she went on to do. The other reason is that Miss West's business model based entirely on crime, can only operate providing the public believes that Miss West is a guru, and any sniff or whiff of disgrace or scandal must be jumped upon and snuffed out immediately. So Miss West needed to get a win of her own against John Watson, no matter how much it cost or how long it took to, if you like, right what she considered to be a wrong, or correct in the public's eyes what she considered to be a mistake. In the same year, Miss West was convicted for the assault on Dr. Cole, in spite of using the same tactics against that case to try and derail it. Of course, away from the courts and the truth, Miss West and the senior members of her cult continued to spin their lies from her website, asserting that Soraya Ma's legal team has filed for an appeal for the sanction ruling stemming from a technical error, so describing John Watson's win in court against Miss West for fraud as a technical error. Miss West goes on to state, under the heading "The Truth," seen in the top part of the above slide, that no business contact between Dr. West and John Watson has ever existed. So here we have Miss West basically asserting that the victim, in this case John Watson, is guilty of the very acts that Miss West has committed, and just being found guilty of by the courts. We will go on to prove categorically in the second part of this video, 16b, that there were indeed business agreements between Mr. Watson and Miss West. Similarly, Miss West asserts from her website that the courts have dismissed the bogus assault case against her, brought by Dr. Cole. Nothing could be further from the truth. The court found Miss West guilty, and the court agreed a plea deal with Miss West that she was offered a year earlier, but didn't accept until literally minutes before the case was due to convene in court. Again, we make the point that the master liars stock in trade are master lies, and lots of them. And the reason for these lies is that Miss West's guru cult extortion business nets on average about $1 million a year, and that this business can only function if the public believe the lies spouted by Miss West and her accomplices in chief, Jack West, her ex-husband, Jeffrey Reynolds, and Dr. Julio Williams. So the cult and Miss West will literally go to any lengths, including murder, to preserve their very lucrative business. The campaign of lies, disinformation, defamation, deceit against both Dr. Cole and John Watson continued from Miss West's website unabated. In this post from Miss West, immediately after the judgment given by the court for John Watson against Miss West, in other words, he won his fraud lawsuit against her, this posting on Miss West's website states that, and I quote, "Watson's extortion conspiracy unravels. Lies, lies, and more lies." In this slide, we see that Miss West is neither a doctor nor a fluffy guru. Starting at the top, there is evidence from a student who wished to remain unnamed for fear of retribution against her from Miss West and the cult, that she is not a fluffy guru. That is to say that she's guilty of violent crimes against other women. The case cited above is where Miss West pulled the hair of employee Susanna Felder so hard that she ripped part of her scalp off her head. And below that, how Miss West suddenly started putting PhD and later added DD after her name around 2001. When asked where she obtained these degrees, she said Christ had awarded them to her personally. Keep the lies coming and keep them big. And here we have the somewhat priceless but huge lie asserted by Miss West from her website in 2008 that she was personally holding open the gates of time. If it weren't so serious, it would be funny. After John Watson's winning court against Miss West for fraud, the propaganda war raged intensely from Miss West's site with this posting. You have to laugh at the title. It's a pack of lies, but she says, be informed. Know the truth. Then the lies continue at a pace. The first one in the first paragraph is that Miss West asserts that she received hundreds of complaints from people about Mr. Watson. Of course, when asked to produce any of these complaints by Mr. Watson's lawyer, there was no reply. In the second paragraph, Miss West asserts that healthcare professionals have profiled Mr. Watson as being mentally unstable and at the risk of complete psychosis. Here is a wonderful example of Miss West mirroring her own faults and mental health issues onto one of her victims. These statements are made all the more ludicrous by the fact that Mr. Watson had emigrated into America from the UK and that all of his medical records were in the UK and remained in the UK, although at the time these statements were made in 2008, Mr. Watson had been living in Canada for 3 years. So quite how Miss West would access his medical records is a mystery to everybody. But of course it's just a pack of lies. Lies are Miss West's stock in trade, as is fraud, theft, extortion, and violent crime. Here in this slide are a list of the court cases that Miss West was involved in during the 2007 and 2008 time frame. So after all the negative publicity and the multiple appearances in court as the defendant in fraud-related lawsuits, Miss West's guru cult extortion business was obviously not going to fly in Montana anymore, as nobody would believe the divine being routine. However, before the cult could think of setting up their operation in another western state where they either don't understand white-collar crime or choose not to prosecute it, they had one big hurdle to overcome. They needed to take down John Watson's websites, as long as they were up, the divine being routine would not fly, and the public would have a comprehensive source of information which showed Miss West to be what she is: a liar, a thief, a fraudster, an extortionist, and a violent criminal who uses her knowledge of the occult to both commit crime and then uses her knowledge of the occult to intimidate the victims into not going to the police or the courts for restitution. One of the big problems they had about John Watson's website was, while Miss West was denying she assaulted Dr. Cole and that Dr. Cole's case against Miss West for assault, which she won, was a bogus case, upon John Watson's website was Miss West's written admission that she had assaulted Dr. Cole and that the assault had been sanctioned by the voices in her head. In a move from Dumb and Dumberer, Miss West had Jeffrey Reynolds write to the service provider of Mr. Watson's website and claim copyright over her admission of guilt, the law of severity on the path of purification, in an attempt to use the Millennium Copyright Act to force its removal from Mr. Watson's website. In the second part of this YouTube video, 16b, I'll show you how Miss West managed to win a defamation lawsuit against Mr. Watson. It really is quite simple. If you have money in the US, you can bring a lawsuit against the other person. And if the other person cannot afford the lawyers or cannot afford the funds to fly across the continent to defend it, then you get summary judgment, as Mr. Watson did in his fraud lawsuit when Miss West refused to participate. So with an unlimited supply of funds provided by public donations, the outcome for Miss West was assured, especially as Mr. Watson did not defend it due to lack of funds. However, it is very illuminating to see what lies Miss West's lawyer presented to the court on behalf of Miss West to ensure that she got the injunction she desperately needed to bring the whistleblower's websites down so that her criminal conspiracy could continue. Please like my website and please help me make it go viral.